Welcome to another edition of the Public Interest. My name is David Granger, and on this series of programs, we examine issues of interest to the Guyanese public, women in the diaspora. And on this occasion, we will look at probably the most important topic in your life. That is the topic of your mothers and the question of motherhood. It is certainly the most important institution in human society because without a mother, you won't be here, you won't exist. And without taking care of this institution of motherhood, something is more important than politics or economics. This concerns your very existence. Motherhood is inevitable and is invaluable, and it is an institution that should be protected and preserved at all costs. I don't think it's an exaggeration to say it's the most important institution in the entire country. And sometimes we're very careless about motherhood. Motherhood influences the behavior of everybody, and not only now, but for generations to come. And from this point of view, we must look at motherhood very critically and ensure that as persons, as political parties, as government, as society, we do everything possible to protect and preserve this institution of motherhood. Without the protection that motherhood deserves and demands, society will suffer and in some cases crumble. Uh, I believe, well, we're all children of mothers, inevitably. I believe that motherhood is a very powerful force for social cohesion and for national integration and for family integration as well. Some people don't believe in social cohesion. Well, I believe in social cohesion. And motherhood is essential, the force for social cohesion, especially mother-child relationships. And these relationships are vital for the healthy development of all children, regardless of race, religion, or which region you're from. Who are mothers? Mothers are caregivers. Very often in Guyana, mothers are the breadwinners. Daddy is not there. Mothers are homemakers. And very often, some young people don't know who or where their fathers are. Mothers are the housewives for their families. In fact, mothers dedicate more time than fathers providing what is called unpaid work in the home. And they perform more hours of unpaid work than fathers ever could do or hope to do or try to do. In some parts of Guyana, particularly rural villages and on the coastland and also villages in the hinterland, mothers are often the gardeners. They're the stall holders. You go to the market and see who's running the stalls. Mothers are traders. You remember during the depression of the 1980s? It was mothers who were going with their huge suitcases to Brazil and Suriname and Venezuela and to the Caribbean and further afield. Um, they were the trading class of Guyana. And they're principally the vendors in our markets and on the streets. So mothers are not only important for the home, but they're important for the entire economy. In both the rural country, coastland, and also the hinterland villages. Sometimes even a hinterland village, father may go off to the mines or to the timber grants. The mother has to put food on the table every day. Sometimes the father may be gone for weeks or months, but the mother has to feed her child every day. So we cannot do without mothers. And And if we do not protect and preserve this important institution, there will be problems in society. I'm not blaming the absence of mother, I'm not blaming motherhood, but I'm praising motherhood. And I'm calling attention to the fact that we are not doing enough to preserve and protect motherhood in this country. My friends, every day mothers have to contend with buying food. And we in Guyana know that the cost of food has skyrocketed over the last 50 months. Motherhood is problematic. It could be problematic. It is a joy, yes, but there are some challenges which have to be addressed. And there can be anxiety, there can be fear, there can be loss for persons who are not prepared for motherhood. It's easy to become a mother, but it is difficult to practice the art and science of motherhood. And we have to look at the issues which affect women who are mothers, and only women can be mothers. First of all, mothers need assistance. This is axiomatic. Mothers need the support of their families. They need the support of their friends. They need the support of their partners, husbands or spouses. They need a network of people who can offer emotional and practical support. I know that certainly in the church I attend, the Christian church, there's always a mothers' union. It means that mothers need to support one another. Perhaps more than fathers need to support one another, mothers need to support. So assistance for mothers is basic. Secondly, mothers need attention. They can feel distressed about their inadequacy or their inability to provide for their children's needs. Children always want something more. I mean, that's is, uh, what children do. They want milk, they want food, they want comfort, they want warmth, they want protection, and mothers are there to provide that that protection, those needs. So mothers could feel distress if they are unequal or if they feel they're unequal to providing for their children. Sometimes children go to school and they see what their friends are eating or wearing, and they come home and they want something similar. They go to the supermarket and they want something. And I'm not saying that all children are like that, but mothers who feel that they cannot provide for their children might start to question their own ability to give the children what they want. And children need material support, they need emotional support. And it is the mother who is there, who they call upon to provide that support. And then there's a question of anxiety. Mothers, sometimes very young mothers, quickly discover that raising children is an expensive enterprise. It is not cheap. And sometimes young mothers without experience could get easily stressed out because every day of their lives they have to make financial decisions in order to meet the family needs. A few households can say there is enough money to meet all the needs of the family. And sometimes the mothers themselves do without so that their children could get. But there's always anxiety, there's always some tension as to how much this child gets or that child gets, or how much a husband gets or how much he gets. And the mother has to be a sort of financial analyst or a budget analyst to make do with limited resources, limited assets. And then there's a question of ambivalence. Um, Maybe this is an unfair quality of motherhood, but sometimes mothers, well, always mothers have various roles to perform, and the roles could be conflictual or contradictory, perhaps. They can have different aims and objectives. It can be stressful. Mothers could be overwhelmed because they have to balance competing duties and obligations. Maybe 50 years ago, maybe in the middle of the last century, many women getting married could expect to be housewives. But that isn't so now. Maybe from the 50s or 60s, it hasn't been so. Many more women are going out to work. I remember in the civil service, um, up to the time of the PNCs going into office, just before independence, women who were public servants had to resign from the public service. And some of them were forced into housewifery because they couldn't remain married in public service. But now more women, if you look at the public service, look at the teaching profession, look at the nursing profession, over 80% of nurses, teachers at public service are women, and over 80% of the women are mothers. So once you have a nurse, teacher, or public servant who is a woman, you know that there's a high likelihood that she'll be a woman, a mother, and she will probably have to look at the duties in the office, in the workplace, in the school, in the classroom, and compare those duties with what she has to do at home. This is something the government doesn't realize in dealing with public servants, nurses, and teachers, that the people they're dealing with are mostly women and mostly mothers, and they have difficult occupational and professional duties. So I'm not suggesting that mothers are ambivalent, but you have two sets of duties, and they're not compatible. They demand a lot of time and energy from the mother. And you speak to a woman teacher, you speak to a woman public servant, you speak to a woman nurse, and she will tell you the difficulties in reconciling her professional or occupational obligation with her maternal duties. And mothers also, I think, are challenged. They have to be, I would say, altruistic. And I don't know any person, male or female, who doesn't love his or her mother. And I think we'd all agree that in general, mothers are altruistic. And they focus their attention on and the energy and the effort on their children, sometimes at the expense of looking after themselves. They spend more time and energy and money on their children than on themselves. Of course, you may find exceptions, but generally speaking, I think mothers like to make sure that their children are well looked after. And sometimes physically, mentally, they put their own needs last and put their children's needs first. So these are some of the things that I think mothers have to think about on a daily basis. It's not something you can postpone, and that is why there's no mother school. People have to learn by experience, and of course, most women learn from their mothers and their grandmothers. Um, but let us look at Guyana society as a whole, not as just a household or a family, but without the support of the state and society. Again, I'm not blaming the government, I'm not blaming the state, but if you look at the list of duties, the list of obligations, the table of challenges facing the modern mother in Guyana today, you will see that without the state taking a positive stand, a positive position, a positive policy on supporting motherhood as an institution, um, many families, many women would be in a great deal of difficulty. And the state has to do more for women and mothers than you would expect that they do for men and even fathers. And this could be maybe a bit problematic, it could be a bit controversial, but I feel that women should be given enhanced access to education. An educated mother is important because an educated mother is going to very likely ensure that her children are educated. So, educating women is an important part of the family, not only to enable the mother to gain mobility in society, to get promotion in her employment or occupation, but also to pass that education on to her children. And when you consider that women are over half of the population, you can see the importance of ensuring that such a huge part of the population um, is able to gain greater social mobility and professional mobility, occupational mobility. And eventually, slowly, governments have come around to ensuring that there's great equality. Certainly, when I was in office in government and leader of the People's National Congress, I ensured that 50% of our MPs were women. And I noticed the other day a party actually elected an executive with not a single woman. This is marvelous in 2024. How could you exclude women from the leadership of your party? So education is important to ensuring that women are not only educated because they will educate their children, and they are most likely to keep their children in school. And it means that from generation to generation, you create this cycle of education. Educated mothers are very likely to ensure that the children are educated. The other role that the state should play is ensuring proper employment for women. People are boasting about employment, but when you look to see the jobs that they give some women to do, with the 3B system, buckets, brooms, and basins, you see them on the highway in Georgetown. Uh, I suppose you can say that there are thousands and thousands of jobs, but I think we want to ensure that the women get jobs which provide sufficient money, sufficient wages. And yes, sweepers and cleaners are important. And when I was in office, I remember APNU, we actually, tripled, salary, the wages of sweepers and cleaners. People used to get me a little less than $30,000 a month. And when you look back at those numbers, they're laughable. And of course, we did what was possible with our limited resources at the time. We didn't have $1 trillion budget, but we made sure that the lowest paid state employees were paid better. But employment, um, which is not secure, which is not sustainable, which is not stable, um, could end up making sure that this large part of our population is poor. And again, I always worry about poverty being hereditary. Poor mothers produce poor children, and so on. And you have to break that cycle of poverty. In fact, in society, women bear a heavy burden of poverty. And unfortunately, it can become intergenerational. As I said, poor mothers are likely to produce children who are poor. Some mothers who are nurses, teachers, and public servants, and I ask you, my friends, to examine these three branches of state employment: nursing, teaching, and the public service. So, although they are in fixed and stable employment, they're poor. They're the employed poor. And not because you have a job in the public service means that you'll be well off. And you can see. Every year for the last, every month for the last 50 months, we've had, teachers and nurses and public servants on the street because the nurses, teachers, and public servants are poor and they feel the pinch of rising cost of living. They don't want black bags. They don't want black tanks. They want proper livable wages. And up to the present day, know, we find that the government is sort of dug in the heels against giving these three classes of state employment, occupied largely by women, you know, um, much less than they deserve. The other challenge is the challenge of equality. We know that there have been changes in equality for women, over the last 40 years, but legislation is not enough. Laws don't enforce themselves. And much more has to be done to protect women from abuse and to promote equality positively and to erase disparities. There are disparities between the coastal and the hinterland. There's no doubt about that. And there are disparities between rural and urban communities. We now talk about simple things like solid waste management, um, you know, disease, uh, you uh, infestation by different types of bugs, so that you know, some communities are more susceptible to diseases like vector-borne diseases like dengue, filaria, and malaria. And so there are disparities which affect not only health but affect the quality of life. And we need to continue to work towards establishing a more equal society. And who best can speak for women than women themselves? And unless you have women in your political parties, in your what you call the central committees, unless they're balanced, unless you have women in the National Assembly balanced, unless you have women, in charge of the decision-making agencies, you're not going to get equality. Unfortunately, 2024, that men are not always the best judges of what women want and need. There's always the question of safety. And I don't think anybody in Guyana could be satisfied with the level of safety of mothers and women from domestic violence. And we have a nasty record of wife murders. And much more has to be done to protect mothers, because many wives are mothers. 22 women were killed in 2021. 28 were killed in 2022. 47 were killed last year. So you can see the trend. No matter what you talk about policing, the trend is that more mothers are being killed every year than ever before. And if we talk about the sanctity of motherhood, we can see that one of the greatest threats is interpersonal and what they call intimate partner violence in the home. And the people who are responsible for making women's lives safer don't seem to have an interest or a clue what to do. And then there are the questions of health, maternal health, especially at the time of childbirth. And unfortunately, um, safety cannot be taken for granted. Mothers in Guyana are many, many more times likely to die in childbirth or from pregnancy-related complications. Something which, of course, has been going on from time immemorial. Mothers get children, that's a fact. And we know that it is a time of risk, and everything that is possible has been done to protect mothers or would-be mothers, pregnant women, um, from that risk. And unfortunately, in Guyana, every month a mother dies. Sometimes more than once a month. In 2020, 13 women died. 2021, 15 women died. 2022, 17 women died. And again, just like white murders, unfortunately, maternal deaths have been increasing over the last 50 months. Those are statistical truths, statistical facts. So mothers rely on the safety of the National Health Service to ensure that their pregnancy and childbirth are provided by persons who are skilled and they have the best birth and obstetric care. When I was in the office, my wife and I went to the Georgetown Public Hospital first thing on Christmas morning. Well, maybe we were fortunate that our children had grown, but we went to make sure that other people's children will have a good start in life. And I think because of our influence and because of my instruction as president, we were able to make serious changes in, you know, in the maternity wards from what we first saw in December 2015. And it wasn't a pretty sight, I can tell you that. And we started to make changes, and I think those changes have been continued. But when we went there, it was pitiful, pitiful. You see mothers who had delivered just a few. Well, I needn't go into details. And sometimes you have to walk sideways to get between beds. Um, but things were better, and we made things better. This is what we inherited. We inherited that, in 2015 from the government that was there before. And we left a better situation than we met. And I expect the thing could have been continued, not go backward. But mother's health is important. Then you have the question of teen mothers. I will deal with this topic a little on another program. I don't want to expand on it now. But the question of motherhood is the, as I said, the most important institution in human society. And it is a biological fact, not only an educational reality, that some pregnancies could come too soon, and they could lead to child marriage. They could lead to even gender-based violence. Sometimes when young girls are not prepared for the burdens of running households. And the question of teen pregnancy, teen mothers, could be affected by the beliefs which some communities have. Um, they could be affected by cultural practices. They could be affected by poverty, in which people incorrectly believe that the best way to ensure their children's happiness and security is to marry them off early. Well, it doesn't always work out that way, and it could lead to gender-based violence in the home. Unfortunately, Guyana has a rate of teen pregnancy, that is, pregnancies of girls between the ages of 15 and 90, which is among the highest in the Caribbean region, among the highest. And then, of course, is the important question of childcare. Mothers must be supported, or should be. I can't say must, they should be supported by family services. The childcare centers are not a sideshow. They're central to the lives, particularly of poor mothers, who have a tremendous workload in the home for their other children. So unless their clinics, unless their services, which are easily accessible, and I would say sometimes in walking distance, because everybody can't afford a minibus or a taxi to go to clinic, sit down there half of the morning. And we must make sure these family-friendly services for childcare are easily accessible, and they help to reduce the woman's workload in the home. Mothers do need strong support, strong public support, strong state support, and they need, of course, a partner, a spouse, or a husband who would share the work in the home. And we need societies, we need governments which recognize that the equality between men and women would make the society more stable. Um, and I don't want to give examples, but sometimes you go to some function and the women are in the kitchen and the men are in the bar, and you know what that involves. Even at church functions, the men are in the bar and the women are at the counter in the kitchen. My friends, the question of motherhood is not a joke. It is something that is central to society. That's why I'm talking about it today. And I'm talking particularly to women and, of course, to mothers. We should learn to celebrate motherhood, but far too frequently, motherhood is beset by risks and threats. Threats to their personal well being, threats of poverty, threats to their health. And we must make sure that mothers of every race, of every religion, of every region in our country don't have to face these difficult challenges to raise their children. And they could raise their children, in fact, in happy and healthy homes. I would feel that we should, in Guyana, make use of this concept of the happiness quotient, HQ, that we should measure our happiness, or the happiness of our mothers and happiness of our homes in terms of the level of emotional, intellectual, occupational, physical, and spiritual satisfaction. Every family, I suppose, can have its own criteria, its own yardstick. But we should measure that HQ, the happiness quotient. Mothers who are happy are very likely to raise families which are happy. Happy families can foster happiness communities with less violence, with less interpersonal violence, less friction, less conflict. Happy communities can make the country happy. It is my belief that every Guyanese mother should be a happy woman in this land of their birth. That is my firm belief, and it is a policy that I believe is capable of being achieved and accomplished in this Guyana. Every Guyanese mother could be happy in this land, and we'd have a happier community and a happier country. Thank you, and may God bless you.